Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, or later on your favorite podcast service, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health in these unprecedented times, as well as how gaming affects us. If you're here with us live in the chat, you can leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, might ask them later in the show. Our topic today for our season finale, season 1, is going to be self-care. But before we get to that, Mitra and Dr. B, who are you for people who may not know?
I'm a registered clinical counselor, therapist working in Victoria, BC. I love cats, long walks in the rain. Actually, no, I lie. I don't like walks in the rain at all. I'm more of a sunny person. But yeah, I work in Victoria, BC with families. I have a specialization in culture and culture and racial identity. That's about all I can say. Maybe more than I should have said, but whatever.
I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons, and I am a doctor of clinical psychology. I don't actually work with clients, but I was clinically trained. These days I do nothing but policy and education, but I did at one point work with people, and I will largely speak from that capacity. And I am also an expert on the applied use of tabletop RPGs. And gosh, what about
you? Do you like cats? Do you like long walks in the rain?
Give us the dirt.
I do love walks in the rain, being a Seattleite, born and raised, still live here. I love cats, highly allergic though.
Ooh, it's rough.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I really adore cats. They're wonderful. They get their space, I get mine. Occasionally we hang out and then go our separate ways. Love that. But yeah, really allergic.
Yeah. I also like long walks in the rain. Unfortunately, I live in a place where that is such a rarity, it never happens.
That's why you love it.
We need to switch places, because I would get on with that and you would love Victoria because you know rain.
I legitimately remember as a child being somewhere and being like, oh, I love the rain. And someone's like, oh, then you should move to England, which is a weird thing to say to a 9-year-old who you don't know. And I went, yes, I would love that. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about self-care today. And I think one of the best ways to start this off is actually a quote that Dr. B found yesterday. You want to read that one off for us?
Yeah. I'll preface it with the idea that self-care is one of those concepts that we hear talked about all the time. If for those of you who watched the Burnout episode, we said something similar. If you haven't watched the Burnout episode, go watch it, because they're just common terms that we hear, but we very rarely hear defined, and we want to make sure we're not talking past each other as we talk about what self-care is. So I found this from a 1983 nursing article that called Self-Care and Health, that self-care in this paper refers to those activities that individuals undertake in promoting their own health, preventing their own diseases, limiting their own illness, and restoring their own health. And as we've already seen come up with the chat, there's, Obo Lauren commented that a lot of dealing with burnout is going to come up here for today. Yeah, there is some definite overlap in terms of preventing burnout and engaging in actual self-care.
Well, there was another thing that you said yesterday that it was, I have a lot of these moments with y'all where I'm just like, oh, I was thinking about this wrong because I said that over the weekend that I had to engage in some self-care because I got into a depressive episode, and you were like, well, most of the time we like to look at self-care as a preventative thing. I was like, oh, you do it first? Oh,
Yeah. So
I was like, I didn't know this. I thought this was like a reactionary thing.
no, I got to give credit where it's due, and it was our community manager at Take This, Dr. Kelly Dunlap, who separated this out for me. And when she said this to me, I had kind of an oh yeah, why didn't I think of that sooner? She likes to categorize self-care into two different categories. One is recovery. Taking breaks, that sort of thing, recovery. But the other is sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of those, especially within the sustainability practices, it's not necessarily glamorous. It's not like you go and buy the latest luxury, I don't know,
thing and stuff.
There's so many products out there that will definitely fix your problems. And if that were the case, why do we need so many of them? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll talk about sort of how people tend to monetize their desire for improvement and get products that they think will help their self-care, but the product isn't a replacement for self-care, and sometimes we confuse those things. And I want to say also, self-care is not self-indulgence, and we sometimes confuse those two. We say treat yourself, and we're thinking about yeah, and I think that that actually is a piece of self-care, that because that's a piece of feeling good about yourself and feeling good about where you are in the moment and experiencing some pleasure, sitting in a sunny corner with a lovely latte and your favorite book or music playing. Like, that is a moment of pleasure that adds resilience to your day, maybe sustains you.
Yeah.
So it's a part of it. And we're also going to get into some of the things that interfere with our ability to do self-care for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think it's important, and this is going to be, this is probably going to come up in the chat as we talk about this, because this can be confusing. Self-indulgence is not necessarily the same as self-care, but it can be a form of self-care at times. An example I like to give is my shaving soaps. Okay, my shaving soaps are well-made, handcrafted, really good smelling shaving soaps. Do I need those? No. Why do I do that? Well, two reasons. One, I have chronic anxiety, and this is a way that I feel I can feel confident about myself. But two, the fact that I get to, choose how nice I smell that day helps me engage in a hygiene ritual on a regular basis that, to be really blunt, I've struggled with chronic depression my entire life. And some days doing those basic activities of daily living are harder than others. And so giving myself some sort of reward in the process of engaging in that, yes, it's a form of self-indulgence. It's also a form of encouragement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the locket I'm wearing, I bought about 3 weeks, maybe a month before I finished my master's thesis. And I was really struggling in terms of writing it. I had 3 little kids. The youngest was 4 and the oldest was, let me see. So we had 4, 7, 9, or 10. Quite young. I think he was 9. So at that point, our lives were so busy. And wait a second, no. Getting the day. Do you know what? I think the thing is, that was such a difficult time.
Oh yeah.
I've obliterated.
Oh yeah, no.
If you remember the entirety of grad school, I don't believe you went to grad school.
No, I think actually Kieran had just turned 4 because he was a year and a half when I started. So no, that does make sense. 4, 7, 9. All right, let's move on. I found myself doing most of my studying and particularly my paper writing at like 2 in the morning, which was brutal. But really, there was no other time. it was not easy. But at this point, I was just at that home stretch, desperate to get finished with all of the commitments, and especially the thesis, which was an albatross upon my back. And everybody who's written any kind of big paper, particularly a thesis or a PhD dissertation, any of that stuff, you're just like, okay, this is like weighing me down. I can barely stand. Um, so I went into this one store because I had about 10 minutes to kill. And I saw this beautiful labradorite silver locket. Not locket, it's just a pendant. Anyway, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, that's not happening. That's expensive. And about a week and a half later, I went back and I purchased it because I decided I was going to put it on the moment I pressed send and submitted the very final copy of my thesis to my instructor, to my supervisor. And it was 4 a.m. at that time. And I was very glad I had something to do to mark the moment.
I love
And
that.
it's many years later now, and I still love this piece, and it still takes me to that moment and the sense of overcoming a difficult obstacle and the pride I had in being able to do it. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's so that's a form of creating faith and hopefulness in a future that you want, giving yourself a little bit something to kind of run that last leg of a marathon process. And having those rewards is an important piece. Having those moments to kind of hold on to when things are difficult can be really useful.
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday, that that something like that can be a form of empowerment or a reward. I mean, you're literally talking about positive reinforcement, giving yourself, and another word for positive reinforcement is reward, to accomplish something that was important to your life. But, and I talked about my shaving soaps, you're talking about your labradorite pendant, but self-care isn't always necessarily luxurious.
Nope.
Because if we think about it as a way of preventing problematic mental health states or physical health states, self-care can also be setting limits on people and ourselves, saying no to things.
Absolutely. And this requires a level of self-acceptance as well, because if we can acknowledge our habits, good or bad, right? Then when we're sitting up and it's like 10:30 at night and you know that you have to be up by 7 and you know that you need a decent night's sleep, and you then can say to yourself, listen, I'm super tempted to watch another episode of the Netflix thing or whatever, but I'm going to go to bed. Because
were you here last night?
I'm in your head.
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't definitely watch Frasier for the 18 millionth time.
I definitely wasn't staying up watching an episode of Futurama that I've seen billions of times.
Okay, so here's what happens to our frontal lobes and our executive functioning. The more tired we get, the less well that they work. Okay, so then that capacity to make those good self-care decisions starts to get, obliterated. And so instead, we're like, it's, 1 a.m. and I'm like, starting to get a little hungry. Who's those fancy cookies over there? There's a bag of chips around the corner. It's bagel. Want that too.
Dude, someone brought home jelly beans in my house and I'm so mad. I'm so mad.
I'm like, sit here and eat these. And then, because you are tired, and so you actually do either need to eat something or go to bed, right? You are not at your best self in terms of your thinking and your capacity to make good decisions for future Mitra. And present Mitra is like, screw that guy. I don't care. Right? Future Mitra may not like it, but who the hell is she? Plus, she's not here right now. Let's just have a great time.
She's not here right now.
Mitra, I
Audio listeners, you gotta just go find the video for this. I can't.
God.
I can't.
Yeah. So, no frontal lobes, out comes the hedonism. It's
Yeah.
a merry moment.
Yeah.
Let's just live it up. And then we pay for it, the next day, and we pay for it maybe a couple of days after. And we're kind of not able to fully, we're not taking care of ourselves. We may have had a good time, but we're not taking care of
Yeah.
ourselves, and we're making our lives harder. So this is where it's about, as you say, setting healthy limits. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where self-care isn't always necessarily glamorous. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking we see so many products marketed to us, and I'm trying to think of an example without calling any particular one out, because I don't like publicly shaming individual products
Yeah.
or whatever. But I mean, I think of various luxury brands who market various things about, to make it to, buy this and it'll make exercise easier. But the problem
Lies.
is, the problem is
Oh.
you still have to engage in the exercise.
Yeah, man,
And
I really thought Ring Fit was gonna solve my problems.
Yeah, it turns out you still sweat.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
It does.
I was like, oh man, I can't wait to do this. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, I hate this.
Well, and one of the things that I think we also need to bring into this focus is Mitra was talking about how she could only do her paper writing at 2 a.m. in the morning. And it similarly to our episode on burnout, sometimes you're not engaging in self-care, not because you're a bad person, but because the system is slanted
Yeah.
against you.
Yeah.
Okay. You've take this. 2 of our staff members are currently pregnant. And when one of them is like, hey, I'm not feeling too great because, pregnancy, we're not going to fire back with, I'm sorry, are you engaging in good self-care habits right now? No, because this is not an individual thing. Sometimes engaging in self-care or a lack of engaging in self-care isn't your fault.
The one of them that I remember seeing publicly last year, at the end of last year, was Ethan Crank Gameplays on YouTube took a month and a half off of everything. And people were like, "What? Why are you where are you going?" And I was in the back just going, yes, take time to yourself."
Yeah. If you have the luxury of being able to do that, take a month and a half off, 45 days off. Oh my God.
Yeah.
If you can do that, but not everybody can.
Yeah. Well, what I meant specific is he'd been making content. Like he did Unis Honest throughout the year, was doing content literally every day and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, you should lay down. Just take a moment to yourself. But yeah, that's that sort of thing where it's your work is the thing that you can't, not all the time you can say no to it. You can't just be like, I'm not going to do this for self-care. It's like, well, fortunately. So what do you do in that situation then?
Well, first you acknowledge it. You have to be aware that there's a thing that you want in terms of your self-care, and you can't make it happen today. And then you also pay attention to how exhausted you're getting. One of the things I remember is, sometimes 2 a.m. was great and it really worked and it was quiet and I could get things done. And sometimes I would get to that place where I was rewriting the same paragraph 4 times because I was just too tired. And it was like, okay, it doesn't matter whether this thing needs to be done. I am not my best self and I'm not going to be able to do it. And so again, recognizing where your limits are, because and trying, I think sometimes we get into a rut with, oh, this thing has to happen and it has to happen now, and we forget that maybe it doesn't. When I was writing my thesis, I was talking to my uncle about it, and I was explaining how I was so stretched, between family and between my clients and the thesis. And he said, can you take time off from your clients? And I remember feeling like at first kind of horrified. Well, no, they need me, But I thought, wait a second, maybe maybe I could do that. And it actually worked out really well. My clients were super understanding about it. And I also was able to refer a couple of them to continuing care with other therapists who could then see them until I could pick back up with them. And they all understood I was a student, and they all understood I was writing a thesis. And we forget sometimes that people are understanding. And I think that's a really important one. Is like, I think I have no leeway, and that might not be true.
Yeah.
So questioning what's available to us and what's possible is really important.
Yeah.
And then when we do have a little bit of time, as they say, when you have a kid, sleep when the baby sleeps. And it's hard because there's a mess in the house and you need to do things. But when you do have a little bit of time, it is important to try and carve some of that to do a thing that's going to replenish you in some way. Whether it's the sunny corner with a book and a cup of tea, or calling a friend and having a phone visit with someone, or whether it's doing a jigsaw puzzle or something, you need to carve out a little bit of time where you can just rest your spirit for a bit, because that's going to make a difference to future Mitra, or future you, as the case may be, and that capacity to get through the rest of your day, week, month.
Mm-hmm. That falls into like the distraction versus avoidance thing, where like you need that distraction to recharge, and you need to, and with the self-care comes in where it's like you need to give yourself the time to have that distraction to recharge.
Yeah.
What are some other techniques that you think is a healthy way of doing self-care?
One of them, I think, is and this may be something that's done with a mental health professional, because a lot of what we deal with as people has to do with internalized negative self-messages. Like the internalization of generativity equals self-worth.
Yeah.
Or I can't take time off, or what, but also working out where some of those systemic barriers are, because there are sometimes very real obstacles to us engaging in self-care, and recognizing those as external barriers can sometimes help us with self-forgiveness and compassion, which in and of itself can be a form of self-care. Being able to let go of some of those negative internalized messages, like it's your fault, when sometimes workplace settings, society is slanted against us, and that's not our fault.
Yeah. And I think we often confuse the individual with the systemic. So people put plans into action, or they think they're going to do a thing, or they decide that today, I'm going to start a campaign of healthy eating, essentially. So then I bring home the kale, and I bring home the carrots, and I bring home and my family, who may not be used to eating this way at all, goes, what's this?
Dr. B, I need that paper.
I don't know. Got it at the ready again.
So it's like, I think that we get excited too about the idea of self-care, and okay, all right, I'm doing it all. And this can lead to overwhelm and shame. Well, now I can't do it. Or I bought these dumbbells and I did this thing, and now I'm not using them, and I feel like a terrible person.
Oh, the Ring Fit. It's sitting in plain view, so it shames me. Yeah, it looks at me from that little corner, just that little Nintendo logo. You're not using me, you jerk.
Right? And so how can we forgive ourselves? Because it's not helping to feel that shame. It's not helping. It sort of freezes us, actually, and it just leaves us feeling more yucky about ourselves. And then the worse we feel about that, the less we think about that we deserve good self-care, that we deserve to spend some time on ourselves as well, even in small ways, to feel better.
Yeah. So let's see, which ones have we gone over here? Oh, sorry, I was looking at the list that we did, because I wanted to be sure that we hit each of these points, because they are really, really good. Because we did the setting limits, the healthy practices. So we did sleep. Where do you want to go from here on this one?
Well, let's go back into, let's talk about health practices again, because again, very often within the messaging we get in society, self-care is a kind of a glamorous restorative thing, whereas self-care is sometimes doing the thing you hate because you know it keeps you healthy. Okay, I run. I hate running. Hate it so much. So much. But it helps me, and I'm going to qualify me because I hate it when people are like, exercise is a cure-all for depression. No, it's not. If that was the case, depression would be gone. But for me, exercise helps me manage my depressive symptoms. Not only for the neurochemicals it helps, but it gives me a sense of empowerment because I did something I hate that I know is good for me. Additionally, it helps my focus and a variety of things. But for me, regular cardio exercise is a form of self-care, and it is not glamorous. With every breath out, I'm like, I hate me, 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 I hate me. But when I get done, it's, oh, my asthma's not bothering me as much. I can think in a more straight line. I feel this elevated mood somehow. That was a good thing. I did well for myself, but the process is not pretty.
Yeah. So you have the opposite reaction to me. Every time after I exercise and I feel that way, I'm just like, damn it, they're right. I want to feel better after this. It sucks.
Well, yeah, but it's one of those things that highlights the idea that self-care practices are not. We brought this up earlier, and I want to bring this up again because I'm a Parks and Rec fan. But that idea of, Donna and Tom of treat yourself to treat yourself. 11. But no, that is not the only form of self-care there is.
Yeah.
It's not always pretty. It's not always, mimosas, perfumes, whatever. It's sometimes sweaty, ugly. I hate this. 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 But I feel good I did this.
Yeah.
I actually think that episode though, still gives a good thing about that is not always the best way of self-care. An example, Adam Scott crying in a Batman costume. Still one of my favorites.
But that was a good moment, actually. That for Ben, that was a good moment because in that moment he started internalizing the idea that he was worthy of something.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing difficult things that support your self-care or support future you. I like to think about past you, present you, and future you.
I legitimately talk about myself like that. Where I'm just that's future me's problem.
Really useful. Yeah, because present me wants to sit on the couch and do nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Present me's a jerk.
Present me actually may have very good reasons for feeling that way. Thank you.
Present me is a hedonist.
Present me is generally a hedonist. Absolutely. Present me would be like, bring that bag of chicken. Bring it.
I picture Mitra just debauching like a Roman empress up there, just like, yes, bring me the bag of chips.
Chips, bring them to me. Yes.
Not that one. It is misshapen.
It is misshapen. Bring me the one where, they've sort of fried and folded over a few times and they're wonderful, like a creatine pastry, but in potato form.
Now feed them to me.
Feed them to me one by one while you wave your palm. Trees.
And I'm just picturing Eric with the palm front.
He wouldn't do it. I didn't marry.
He can still wear a kilt. He can still wear the kilt. It'll be fine.
But you were saying about present you versus future you versus past you.
Right. So I'm going somewhere with this. In fact, to future me. So and I genuinely talk to myself this way sometimes. I'm like, okay, do you really want in 5 years to not be able to move as well as you do now? Do you want to not be able to feel comfortable picking up heavy objects, right? And it's this kind of thing where I actually do want to continue to stay healthy. And I know that sometimes when present me thinks about past me, I think about things I could have been doing that I wasn't. And this is not to shame myself. This is to say, okay, that's fine then. What do we want to do into the future? What do we want to do to feel better and to stay healthy physically, to be able to sort of hike the Pyrenees someday or Machu Picchu or wherever it is we want to go and things we want to do. I don't want to be hampered by the idea that I can't walk that far, right? I don't know if my kids will have kids, but if someone does, I don't want to think about whether I can run after them, take care of them, do fun things with them. So this is just about wanting to enjoy my life and continue to enjoy it, because I know that's going to make future Mitra feel better and have a lot more good memories into the future. So yeah, present me has to control her hedonism in order to do that. But present me is definitely kind of like, sometimes when I book, I know I have a really busy work week, and I've booked a lot of clients, and maybe I book one rather early in the morning. And I'll say, my boss is such a bitch. Like, who does she think she is? Does she really think that I want to wake up at 7 in the morning? Who the hell is she? Like, what? And the rest of me is going, yes, but then you get to take Friday off. Come on. You want Friday off. Let's talk about this. If you work really hard Wednesday and Thursday, you get to take Friday off because you've like front loaded, the whole thing. So, at some point you have to decide what's sustainable for you, and overdoing it isn't necessarily good for me or my clients, but it is this continual dialogue between present me and future me. So
well, and you bring up a good word for this, and this was also brought up in the chat, and that's sustainability.
Yeah.
That, as we've said, self-care is not a one and done, buy an item and your problems are fixed. Because again, if that were the case, we'd all be buying the same item and we wouldn't be having this episode. But instead, it's an ongoing process that is not necessarily easy.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to point out that Babylon Ranger says self-parenting is also a skill that involves practice, and it absolutely is. And I'll often talk about, all right, you've got the capable adult in you, and you've got this 4-year-old who'd like to throw a temper tantrum.
Yeah, that's
and you're
the one I'm
just
familiar
going to
with.
take that child by the hand, and you're going to go sit somewhere nice for just a few minutes, and we're just going to all calm down together, essentially.
I am a tall 4-year-old with a beard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually have something that I want to put into that will actually lead us into the next topic. But before we do that, I wanted to remind our viewers and listeners of our disclaimer.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
I'm sorry to inform all of you that you missed Mitra's disclaimer dance. But what
it was very disclaimery.
I had a bit of a stretch.
There you go.
I
There
think
you go.
see that.
It's important. So what I wanted to talk about there is one of the things we wanted to bring up was retail therapy. And I am so guilty of this on a constant basis. But you made me think about something when you're talking about the health part of it. I totally treat retail therapy as instant gratification and to make me happy. One of the most infamous times I can remember of this is where I was like, oh, I really want to get a PlayStation Vita, but I absolutely shouldn't. And I got super depressed about something that was not related to the PlayStation Vita, and then I just went and bought one to make myself happy, and it did make myself happy, and it was completely avoidance. It was not distraction in any way, shape, or form. It was 100% avoidance, and I played the living crap out of that thing, even though there was nothing to play on that thing when it launched. But it was just, I needed to avoid it. And because of that instant gratification, when I did eventually try to do exercise, I went into it so hard that I messed myself up, and then I was like, oh, I can just do this as quick as retail therapy. Nope. Guess who has back problems now? And so like even one of them, I was like, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week and do it for an hour each time, and I'm going to do all of this stuff. And like by the second day, I'm like, I'm dying. And then I would get so discouraged from it because I didn't get that instant gratification that I just never did it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's really, really common. I've been guilty of it myself as well. I remember at one point when it actually worked and was sustainable for me, the big thing I was telling myself when I went to the gym was better than nothing. So even if we're doing something that we're like not familiar with, our bodies get tired. You can't, and you're using muscles you don't normally use. Yeah, it's going to hurt. Taking breaks is important. Doing it in a sustainable way is important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But we forget that because there is this instant gratification. And this is why it's so easy when you talk about retail therapy, either the just buying something you want or getting obsessed with something you think you'd be interested in buying. You know, it's kind of a fun place for the mind to rest sometimes. It's like, oh, there's these cool things that I never knew I wanted, but now I'm deep down the rabbit hole of examining, you know. Let's see. At one point, I was looking at enameled pots, you know, Le Creuset and whatever.
Oh, Le Creuset? Oh, yeah, they're great.
There we go. Yeah.
Enameled cast iron, they're wonderful.
Enameled cast iron is a rabbit hole you don't necessarily want to go down. I'm just saying. You know,
apparently kitchen websites need to be taken away from both Mitra and me.
I was about to say, like, do we need to do an off show, which is cooking with Mitra and Dr. B?
Yeah.
I do know what to do with kale. I chop it up really small and add it to soups quite often.
I'll give you some kale recipes that are delicious.
I love kale. It's fine. But I'll be happy to take on your kale recipes and enjoy them. So that sounds good. And my kids will actually eat kale. Weirdly, they'll eat kale, but they don't like avocados. What is wrong with these people? But anyway, to be fair, one of them does like avocados, but I don't know what to do about the other two. Maybe someone has ideas. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So yeah, the instant gratification piece, the idea that I could acquire a thing, which means I'm doing a thing, but that's not true. I just acquired a thing. Ring fit. I still need to actually do the thing. It's interesting how doing the thing is so much harder than just acquiring the thing. I have to learn this lesson constantly.
I think you said this yesterday, and it was so good that I wrote this down, that buying the thing doesn't mean you have the thing.
Yes.
And that's what it sounds like, you know, what you're getting at is the idea that just because you buy the item that you still have to do the behavior.
Exactly. You can
which is the hard part.
Which is the hard part, which is why lots of people have yoga mats and dumbbells and, you know, a whole series of items that they may or may not be using. I would like to point out that the other day, just looking at the used Victoria website, you know, there's always at least a treadmill or two in there. You know, and we all know that, you know, a lot of times you end up hanging your clothes off of it because it's in your bedroom or something.
There's a guitar on mine right now.
Now, do you use the guitar or did the treadmill and
Listen,
guitar
we don't
join
need
each
to
other
talk
and they're
about
like,
this,
"Listen,
Mitra.
man."
I regret mentioning the
I see you're
guitar.
not being used either.
Listen.
But as a counterpoint to that, because there are times where buying something can be a form of self-care. But the question I always like to ask myself is, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And being truly honest with myself. Is this a distraction? Is this an avoidance? Is this something that's going to make it easier, not easy, but easier to engage in a practice that will maintain my health? Certainly me going out and buying better running shoes helped me with that, because I had less aches and pains. You know, buying, when I could afford them, buying the good running shoes made a huge difference. So now it's less painful. It's less literally punishing for me to go out and do the thing that was already punishing in the moment, rewarding in the end. And future me has to talk to present me about that. But other things, like simple things, people have commented on my bow ties. Being able to choose, this can be a form of retail therapy for me. And the reason is because this allows me to express myself the way I choose and have a little bit more self-confidence when I deal with constant social anxiety. And the why of that behavior is incredibly important. The behavior may look in the same way we talked about avoidance and distraction, the behavior may look the same, but the why is crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to answer that question for yourself, because if you're going to indulge in a thing, that's fine. And if you know you need a piece of equipment that's going to be useful to you, that's also important. You know, say you are already running, and say you, like me, you're not at all interested in running in the rain, and it's a real barrier to you doing this thing that you actually are quite willing to do. Maybe then buying a treadmill really would make sense for you, right? But if you're the sort of person who's never actually been interested in running, but maybe other forms of exercise or dance would be more fun, then doing an online dance class might be more the thing, rather than investing in a piece of equipment. So you just have to know yourself and think about what you want, and be able to sort of honestly answer that question. Because I find one of the things that's really challenging is all of these items one can buy are shiny and new and exciting and presented as the answer, because they want you to buy them. You know, let's remember that. So they're presented as the perfect answer to your problem. You may not actually have a problem, let's be clear, but they're presented as this thing that you need to have. And when we're in a vulnerable place where we're maybe feeling like, I really need to make some changes in my life, I'm not feeling so good about me, I want to feel better about me, we're in a place where we might be more, open to suggestion. And this may be a bad thing or, kind of a problem in terms of,
You just made
buying
me remember a
canoe or something.
You made me just remember a car commercial from years ago in my area where I never thought about it till now. It always cracked me up, but they literally had it where like everyone, like it was raining and dark and dreary, and then the car pulled up and it got sunny, and I just went, were they literally saying the car would solve your depression? But no, like I wanted to go back a little bit to something that you said about I didn't even know about this a week ago. And I vividly remember this one point where I don't even remember what the thing was, and that's really shows how little it mattered. But I was suddenly like, oh, I have to have this. This is the coolest thing ever. I need it. And then it was out of stock, and I was hunting for it, and I was going so hard. I'm like, and then I remember stopping and going, you literally didn't know this existed a week ago, and it is all you have thought about for 3 days. And then I was like, why are you? Oh my God, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
And it was that the realization of just like, yeah, I was avoiding being depressed by like hyper focusing on this one thing because it would make me so happy to have it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and one of the things that I think we all need to take into account, and this is really learning about ourselves, and I'm biased. I'm not necessarily wrong, but I'm biased, and I always think a good mental health professional is really good at helping people with self-examination. How much the media creates problems that weren't necessarily problems for us, and preys on our insecurities. Like, if something were to come along and be like, are you tired of drooling in your sleep? I'm like, what of it? Stop that unsightly drool. I'm like, yeah, well, hate to tell you this. I'm asleep. I can't really help it. Oh, I can wear a styrofoam cup that I mean, it's a lot of times that things are marketed. We get these externalized messages that something we didn't know was a problem is a problem, but is it?
Yeah.
Is it though?
Yeah, that's
Is it
such a
really?
good question.
Has it ever really gotten in my way?
If I have to say, I'm just really amused by the styrofoam cup idea.
It was the only thing I could think of. At the
And
time.
see, in my head, I was like, no, they take it further. It's like, but it's also got a humidifier in it that turns the drool into humidity.
Oh, so
Kind
it's
of
like a
fan.
Fremen still
Yeah,
suit. Okay,
yeah.
No, I'm down with that.
Yeah,
I
no,
wanna
nobody,
see
No
Mark,
more
nobody,
dry mouth. No more drool.
Yeah.
no one,
I want to
no
see
patent
this,
this.
but not on me. Let's be clear.
Yeah. I mean, but they create problems we didn't think we had.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Before we pass over to chat, do either of you have any last things you want to say on self-care?
Oh, I know Mitra has thoughts.
So many. But we only have so much time, and I'm happy to pass it over to chat as well. Briefly, though, I want to help people consider the barriers to self-care. You know, when you're really tired and overwhelmed, yes, your self-care isn't going to be ideal. Please do not berate yourself or shame yourself for that. It's very natural when we're going through some kind of crisis or challenging time, like now, maybe our self-care isn't perfect. And that's okay, you know, because you're coping with things. You've
Yeah.
got enough going on. So there has to be a recognition of where we are and what we're able to do, not just in terms of the time constraints or financial constraints, but also in terms of the load we're carrying.
Yeah.
So
I would like to add into that, in addition to the idea that our capabilities for self-care are a variable concept depending on the external factors that Mitra is talking about, but also our abilities to do certain forms of self-care. My abilities to do certain things are going to be different than Mitra's, are going to be different than Trevor's, and really doing a form of self-assessment to see where are your strengths. What is truly restorative for me in a sustainable manner? What are things that keep me going sustainably, that maintain my wellness and prevent future problems that I am capable of doing and that I'm good at doing? Because again, capitalizing on your strengths is often a helpful thing to do. I mean, if you're already good at something, then I think there's a pretty good chance that you're going to continue to do it because you feel empowered by it.
yeah, so it's also really about finding the things that work for you.
Yeah.
Which is a trial and error process. It is absolutely a process.
So well, first off, those were both absolutely great points. And I do hope that people kind of just take a moment at some point today and just kind of think like, what is it? What would be the thing for me? Let's see what Chaz got going on. So let's see. This is I don't know how to say your name, and I apologize. I'm going to read your question. I apologize. They said, a friend and I were talking last night. I finally had a therapist that clicks with me, and one of her first questions was, "What makes you happy?" I was at a loss and have had to really think about it. Yeah, and that's something with self-care that I think is something that some people struggle with, where it's like, well, what does make me happy? Like I said, this last weekend I hit a really bad low point. It was through no one's fault. Literally, my brain was like, "Hey, you're sleeping right now. How about I mess with you?" And so that day, like I said, that I did self-care. I did like reactive self-care. It wasn't the preventive one. And so, like, I told my wife about the dream and everything like that. First off, I'm gonna be honest, I had a good freaking cry. Like, that was like the first thing that I had to do to start working on self-care, is I just had a good freaking cry. And then I played a game that I knew that I love and that always makes me happy, and I enjoy playing it. And then my wife was really awesome and ordered food from a place that we both really love. And so, like, that was like, we both recognize things that make me happy and that we could do just a little bit of that day to try and bring me up a little bit. So it's just little things like that game. Like, if I would probably forget about talking about it on a video game show or something like that. But like in that moment, I'm like, that game makes me happy. I need to play it. And so I that's what I had to do.
Yeah. Go on. You were going to say something.
Well, the one of the when I hear that, what makes me happy, I'm going to fire back another question: what is happy? And this is another one of those terms that we use with impunity, but we don't necessarily define for ourselves. And I've got a very long series of answers I can give, and I'm still kind of angry about this because artists are so good at doing complex concepts in really wonderful bite-sized chunks. Matt Inman, the Oatmeal, does an amazing comic on what happiness is. And the way we often talk about happiness is this constant state of euphoria, which is not sustainable. Instead, if we reframe that, is what is contentment, what is satisfaction, what is being just in a state of acceptance with one's life. Instead of this constant state of blissed out euphoria, which just cannot happen. And I would worry if someone ever approached me like that, if someone never had a bad day, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'd be quite concerned.
I would be concerned they're a super villain.
But yeah, I that's one of the things I would think about is what is happy and what does that mean even, and reframing that as contentment and satisfaction brings self-care out of the realm of comfort into sustainability.
Yes, I would agree. I tend to think as well that we have an idea that we should always be consistently happy, but happy is an emotion. That's no different than saying, I expect to always be consistently angry. Do we see how ridiculous?
Yeah.
Because what happens through the day and through minutes maybe is we go like this. Our emotions cycle up and down and around depending on what we are experiencing, what we're coming in contact with, what's moving us in the moment. The core self state needs to somehow hold the space for all of that within us, right? Part of what we're doing when we talk about self-care is creating a sustainable core self state, right? A resilient self, if you will, that can manage all of the ups and downs of life. So it is about the small steps we take to care for ourselves. And it is also about, bringing some joy into our lives or something that soothes us when we're going through a tough time. And to your question, or to the question around happiness, part of it is like, if I know I'm feeling down, there are resources I can draw on. Whether it's a good meal or time with my spouse or my kids, or a game that I really enjoy playing. I mean, even now, and certainly in the early days of the pandemic, playing Animal Crossing was fun. And
Yes.
it also took me out of, it was by a sunny beach, and, there were these cute little characters I could play with, and they were my villagers. And sadly, they don't do anywhere near as much as I wish they did. It's a repetitive set of conversations.
You want to talk about a game that reminds me I don't work out enough.
Oh my God, these villagers.
They always
see
end
the
up
chance to-
exercising, and I'm just over here. It's like, I just turned this on for the first time in 3 months.
I'm getting pumped, superstar.
Yeah.
I'm getting candy.
Chips.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up Pancakes 337, who's Lee Goldberg from
What's
Griddle Champions.
Hey.
Question: how do you manage good self-care when the baby being asleep is the only free time, so you end up staying up later due to freedom?
Yeah.
Remember us talking about systemic barriers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think the closest I can relate to this is, having a 5-day-a-week job and, having to I have to go to bed this time, but it's my freedom. I want to stay up.
And it's not just freedom. It's what you do to sustain the rest of your life. So what's really happening in those moments is your two forms of self-care are colliding. and it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I am a night owl, and I had a terrible time with this. My firstborn was wide awake at 6 a.m. and thrilled to be in the world. Woohoo! And I was a little less thrilled. But, poor kid, but doing my best to mirror good parent stuff. But yeah, it's exhausting. And so, first of all, you forgive yourself for staying awake sometimes. Second, maybe you negotiate with your partner as to who gets to sleep in and taking terms with that if that's possible. Like, I don't know that it is, depending on your life situation. But if it is, it's kind of nice to be able to alternate so that you have a little space. It is really hard. Absolutely. I was never more grateful once school was done as well, because I had to drive them in the mornings. And then finally, Eric and I alternated as well with that. But oh my God, the school schedule, the grind, the 8 in the morning. Yeah.
Lee put in the chat that he and his partner call it quote, tomorrow I sleep.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The last question, because there's a lot of good ones in here, but I do want to get to this one before we call it a day. Well, call it a season. I work in corporate space and have been with them for years now. I've survived several reductions in forces, taking on more work to compensate for the reduced workforce. My company says that you can take time off, but there's this aura of fear of, if I take the time off, am I going to have a job when I come back? Yeah, that one. Yeah, and this is one of those things where, like, I want to be able to say, talk to your HR person, but I don't know how your company is, and I've heard some bad horror stories about that.
Yeah.
And that is definitely one of those where, like, I mean, I don't know how it works at your company, but, like, if you can even do just incremental time off where it's like, I'm giving myself this Friday, I'm going to take this Friday off and, have a 3-day weekend. Something along that pushes that Sunday night a little bit further away. But it's rough.
Yeah. It is a really tough one, and it does speak to, how is that corporate culture in terms of being a fit for you, and what do other people do to navigate that situation? You might know what's happening with coworkers, or what sorts of choices other people are able to make that allows them to sustain themselves. But it's very difficult in a situation like that. So it's hard, but there's a piece here around questioning your own fear. And it may be very based in the reality of the company. It may be that other people who've taken time off have somehow lost ground at the company, or if not lost their seniority, not been able to advance any further. So there's all kinds of ways in which this could be really problematic. So part of it is really getting comfortable and understanding what the company culture is, and I'm sure you already know that quite well. But it may be worth also examining your thoughts around, is that extra Friday now and again, or Monday, or whatever would work? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah.
Because sometimes our fears do interfere with looking for what's maybe possible. Yeah.
Well, I think that is going to do it for this week and this first season of Champions of Psychology. Mitra, Dr. B, where can people find you on the social medias?
Well, I'm not super active on Twitter, as some people may have noticed, but I do check my notifications and my DMs. So please feel free to contact me there. And of course, you can also contact me through my website. And I would love to hear from people, because I love what we're doing here and my wonderful companions in this journey. So yeah, at Mitra Jordan.
And I am at the Dr. B. If you right down there. 2 E's. Spell out doctor, last name B.
Last name B.
Yeah, the last name B. See, it's convenient because it stands for different things on different days. When I'm not clean shaven, it stands for beard. When I am clean shaven, it stands for baby face. When I run into walls, it stands for bozo. But yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I'm probably going to end up tweeting out some questions for y'all, because I'd be really curious to find out what you want to hear from us in season 2.
That is actually a great segue
idea.
into season 2. So yeah, we are going to be taking the next 2 weeks to figure out what we are going to do for season 2 and what topics we want to cover. But we want to hear from you. Yes, you. I see you there, sitting there in your chair, looking at the computer or driving in the car. Keep your eyes on the road. So we want to know what topics you'd like to hear us cover, and the best way to do that is to either tweet at us or to email us at championsofpsychology@codenameentertainment.com with your suggestions, because we really do enjoy doing the show, but we want you all to get something out of it, and the best way for that is to know what you want us to talk about. So if you can help us out with that and let us know, we'd very much appreciate it, and make the show that you all want to see. I want to thank Jay for moderating in the chat, as always, doing a fantastic job, and also putting in the text document at one point, I'm in this video and don't like it, as well. And
Wait, they already did?
Yeah. Well, they I think it was something that I was talking about. They just put it, I'm in this video and I don't like it. And I want to thank Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. If you missed this episode, you can catch it later as a podcast at 2 p.m. today. And again, any suggestions for future topics in season 2, which will be happening April 13th, I believe. I'm actually gonna click real fast and make sure that, yes, April 13th. That is how math works. But yeah, if you're live with us right now, be sure to come back for Bardic Inspiration. They're doing a song about Alindra, and Jen is going to be there to help out with it. And if you missed the preview for the studio album for Havilar's song last night during Idle Champions Presents, go check it out. It's on the socials. It's fantastic. There needs to be an anime intro that goes with it.
Definitely.
Yes. But yeah, that is going to do it for this week and this season. We'll see you in 2 weeks. But until then, take care of yourself.
Bye,
Take
chat.
good care.
Talk
Bye.
to you all in a school-appropriate way.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.